Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood for the Nintendo DS is a good game. Was it the Sonic RPG that I had hoped for? Well, yes and no. For those of you who don't know, Sonic Chronicles is the Hedgehog's first attempt at an RPG game, like Super Mario RPG was for Mario. It was developed by BioWare, a company known for such acclaimed titles like Baldur's Gate and Mass Effect. Knowing this company would be responsible for Sonic's first RPG had a lot of Sonic fans excited, myself included. To summarize the plot, well, Knuckles has been kidnapped and the Chaos Emeralds have gone missing. Sonic, being the hero he always is, decides to go and rescue him. Along the way, he'll receive assistance from his friends that joined/plagued his past adventures, such as Tails, Knuckles after rescuing him, Amy, Rouge, Shadow, Big the Fat Ass, Cream, E123 Omega, a new character named Shade, and even Dr. Eggman joins their party for some time. You find out later that a group known as the Marauders, or the Dark Brotherhood as some would call them, is responsible for the mentioned crimes. The leader of the group, known as, well, I can never get his name. It's spelled IX, but for future purposes, I'm just going to call him Ziggy. Anyway, Ziggy is the leader of the Dark Brotherhood and wants to use the power of the Chaos Emeralds and Master Emeralds in order to bring his world, the Twilight Cage, into Sonic's world, where he will then conquer it. After bitch-slapping him around in the middle of the game, Ziggy decides to retreat into the Twilight Cage, where the second half of the game commences. It's around this time that we discover that Ziggy and Shade are actually echidnas. No, not those, but like Knuckles. It turns out Knuckles isn't the only one of his kind after all. But moving along, Eggman and Tails build a ship that is able to take the gang into the Twilight Cage, but Eggman decides to stay, and you can already see where that's going. After countless missions and Chaos Emerald hunting, the gang finally manages to confront Ziggy in his lair, where he is promptly handed his ass on a silver platter thanks to Super Sonic. With the Chaos Emeralds and Master Emeralds rescued, the gang heads back to their world where they find out that Eggman used the time given to him to effectively take over Sonic's world. At this point, the game ends. Yes, I'm not kidding. That's where the game ends. On a cliffhanger. The funny thing is that Tails and Sonic break the fourth wall and tell us, the gamers, to wait for episode 2. That about sums up the plot. Bravo, BioWare. Anyway, the entire game is touchscreen based. You don't use the D-pad or the other 4 buttons. You may use the shoulder buttons depending on your preference, but they're completely optional. Now, as a DS game, this should be expected. It works out most of the time, but it can be tiresome after a while. You navigate through the overworlds by dragging the stylus across the screen, causing whoever you're controlling to move in that direction. Again, it can get tiresome, and you'd wish they put an option to use the directional pad. There are no random encounters like some RPGs, and enemies are completely visible on the field. As such, it's your choice to fight, or to completely avoid your enemies altogether, although being an RPG, you're going to have to fight to level up eventually. Battles are turn-based. You choose what actions you want to take and watch as your allies deliver some whoop-ass to your enemies. Specials go under the name of POW moves. They can range from powerful single attacks, status boosting, or team attacks, like those seen in Chrono Trigger. However, executing POW moves is not as simple as choosing them and watching the characters execute them. Upon beginning the move, you need to input certain time commands, which varies between hitting a circle 8 times before time runs out, hitting a circle as the ring closes in on it, or dragging a circle to a specific point with another circle. It's confusing to explain, but if you played Elite Beat Agents, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The same rules apply when an enemy is executing a special move. By inputting the proper command, you can completely avoid the attack, but mess up once and, well, you live. Overall, it works, but it can become extremely repetitive after some time, and it can become extremely frustrating when you screw up a move, especially the healing moves. Mess up once, and it completely fails. Not only that, but this system forces you to keep your eyes on the screen at all times. You can't just input a move, take a sip of your drink, and think it'll be okay like other RPGs. No. You have to be ready and willing every second, for it can determine whether you'll live or die. That's not saying you'll die a lot. This game is very easy, and I mean very easy. There are just some special moves in the game that completely break it. Bosses are just as easy as regular encounters, and some characters have moves that are just ridiculous. I'm looking at you, Cream. In fact, I've beaten most bosses just using Sonic and Amy's fastball technique and Cream's refresh. The other characters just chipped in a little bit. Also, the game is very linear. It is impossible to get lost in this game. If you manage to get lost, then you're not playing Sonic Chronicles. You're probably playing Metroid. The game mostly consists of going from point A to point B. You're told where to go through dialogue, and then it's marked on your map with a star. And if for some reason you still don't get where you have to go, you have a mission log that tells you what just happened and where to go next. Also, because it's so damn straightforward, there's little to no exploration. Sure, there are a few side quests, but they're mostly the typical, get this around the corner, bring it back, and I'll give you a petty award for it. It can become quite boring. There are item shops, but the only thing you're going to ever need to buy are healing items. There are weapons and armor that can increase your stats, but the boosts are so pathetic that I didn't even bother with them. And you know what? The game was still a breeze. There is also Chow in the game. Yes, those cute and adorable little bastards are back as relics of a sort. You can equip them to characters to get all kinds of effects like adding the fire element to your attacks, to completely eliminating the need to input commands for PAL moves. Again, broken. Of course, you have to find them first, but that's not the point. It's not like they're well hidden either. The visuals are quite nice, the backgrounds are beautifully hand-drawn, and the character models are nicely rendered, though it's a bit rough around the edges. While some characters look cool, some characters just look butt-fugly. Sound effects are quite nice, it's chock full of sounds from past Sonic games. But I don't think that's an excuse to use them for battle effects. Some of them come off as really lame because of inappropriate timing. Though the sounds are cool, the music is absolutely fucking terrible. Does this sound like a DS game? No, it does not. It sounds like it was made for the Sega Game Gear. The only exception is the battle themes. They're okay. But for everything else, it's a complete mindfuck. And you know what? People claim that they're remixes of old Sonic tunes, but let me tell you, this doesn't sound like this. Overall, Sonic Chronicles is not the game I was hoping to be, but it's an enjoyable one altogether. The battles are good when you execute them well, the dialogue is top notch, and I think it's only a sample of what BioWare has in store for the Hedgehog. But that's not to say they shouldn't work out the kinks, like implementing button controls and a better battle system, and for the love of all that's sacred, a better soundtrack. But with all that said, I'm Johnny of the Super Gaming Brothers. Have a good night, everybody.
Of memories of 2008. The Phillies won the World Series. I was about a year into my education at the Art Institute of Philadelphia, and I was horribly depressed and unemployed. It wasn't the best year for me mentally, and I have no problem with saying that out in the open. Video games were often my escape, and around this time, personalities such as the angry video game nerd, the nostalgia critic, and a shitload of other people with something to say were really starting to get their voices out there. After thinking about it for a bit, I figured, hey, I think I can do that too, and God knows I had to keep myself distracted, so I went on to create this channel. Close to a decade later, it's been some ride so far. So take it from me, if you're ever in a similar rut that I was, where I seemed aimless, didn't know what to do with myself, just keep going, and eventually everything will work out. It may not be immediate, but it will happen. You just gotta go out there and express yourself. So I started things with the Kingdom Hearts rant, because who the fuck wasn't ranting about something around that time? It was Sonic the Hedgehog where I found some sort of comfort zone to establish myself. As a fan since the early 90s, I felt I could express my honest-to-God doubts about this franchise, and like a wanting child, hope someone would listen in and express their opinions as well. I think that all worked out in the end. I have these two games to thank for that. They were some of the first Sonic games I ever reviewed, back when this channel was the Super Gaming Brothers, before that became the dedicated Let's Play channel over on SGB Likes to Play. You should check it out if you haven't already. Look at this. My God, is that me? I had hair! Oh man, the dying smoke detector. Why did I never replace the batteries for that shit?
There are weapons and armor that can increase your stats, but the boosts are so pathetic that I didn't even bother with them.
It's crazy, isn't it? How time flies. Well, it's been almost 9 years since I looked at these two games, so let's start with Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood for the Nintendo DS.
Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood for the Nintendo DS is a good game.
Wow, I really said that, didn't I? Okay, Sonic Chronicles, as you may know already, was the Hedgehog's first and as of this time only attempt at starring in a role-playing game. And it felt like a long time coming. Mario was already... Jesus, how many? A Super Mario RPG, 3 Paper Mario titles, 2 Mario and Luigi titles. What was taking Sonic so long? And I was down with the idea, as I said before. Been a long time fan of RPGs. Started with Final Fantasy IV on the Super Nintendo, and the rest is history. I could spend a long ass time just talking about my RPG origins, but I'll save that for another time. Now, BioWare being revealed as the developer of the title had people excited, but that didn't have a whole lot of impact to me personally. I knew of Baldur's Gate, Knights of the Old Republic, and shit, I couldn't go very far without hearing someone talk about Mass Effect around the time. But I didn't play any of these at the time. I didn't really care who developed it, I just wanted a good RPG starring the Blue Blur, and in 2008 I thought this game was fine. Not outstanding, not terrible, but I also haven't played this since 2008. Still got the original save file right here, as well as the stylus that came with pre-orders. It's been some time, and there's probably a reason for that. Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood begins as Sonic and friends thwart Dr. Eggman in his latest attempt for world domination. The gang save the day and Sonic decides to go away for a bit. Not sure how long, but it's implied to be a few years. Maybe this is where he overdosed and thought he was in the Arabian Nights or a Knight from Camelot. But Sonic returns eventually and meets up with Tails after learning that Knuckles has been kidnapped and the Chaos Emeralds have been stolen by a gang of highly advanced creatures known as the Marauders. Together, along with the assistance of Sonic's returning friends and Gun, Knuckles is eventually rescued, and by that I mean he rescues himself, and Sonic just happens to get there when he does that. The gang sets up a plan of attack against their new foes, leading to an uneasy alliance between them and the returning Dr. Eggman, claiming to be reformed. Yet nobody buys that, but the Marauders are seen as the bigger threat, so they team up and head to Angel Island, as the Marauders are after the Master Emerald next. The Marauders are revealed to be long-lost Echidnas, led by Imperator Ix, who wishes to use the Master Emerald to bring his army and base of operations from this so-called Twilight Cage, a dimension he was banished to, and then proceed to conquer Sonic's world. This doesn't sit well with one of the Imperator's generals, Shade, who thought Ziggy here just wanted to get out of the Twilight Cage to liberate his fellow Echidna tribe. But no, dude's a generic dictator and all that, and after a small confrontation, he leaves Shade to die, steals the Master Emerald, and retreats to the Twilight Cage to finish his plan, prompting Sonic and friends to chase after him. Inside the dimensional prison, they come across a few other extraterrestrials that initially give Sonic and friends some shit, but they all unite under a common goal when they realize Sonic wants to put an end to Ix's tyranny. It's like Ix conquered all these different races, and they all begrudgingly work for him, but they secretly resent him and shit like that. It's lazily handled, but it's thanks to them that Sonic is able to reclaim the Chaos Emeralds, and finally takes the battle to Ix's lair. One supersonic encounter later, Ix is quickly defeated, the gang escape the Twilight Cage, only to find out Eggman has conquered the world while they were gone. Apparently time flows differently while inside the Twilight Cage, and Eggman jumped right on that shit. Then the game ends, just like that. The cliffhangiest of all cliffhangers, and though the game rather humorously breaks the fourth wall to thank the developers, it doesn't mask the fact that this ending, as well as the story, was lame as shit. Nothing much happens here. I summed up an RPG story in about a minute. To elaborate, I'm talking the narrative structure. If we're talking characterization, honestly I think that's fine. Assuming you're not a fan of Team Chaotix, or Being the Dynamite, Maya the Armadillo, Bark the Polar Bear. All your favorite Sonic characters are here, and this game takes full advantage of their established personalities for the sake of some witty dialogue, and thanks to the dialogue tree formula that I'm sure BioWare fans are sure to recognize, you can make Sonic out to be a full-out paragon or a full-blown renegade dickhead. I mean, you're still the hero at the end of the day, but if you keep up with the asshole quips, you'll be wondering how the fuck are these people still friends with this douchebag when everything ends. But good characterization can only keep a bare plot interesting for so long. This game rarely has anything I describe as character development, or even adequate world building, and the overarching story is so one-dimensional, I'm surprised they managed to stretch this into a 20-plus hour adventure. Let's start with the Marauders. We know they're a long-lost Echidna tribe, but besides Shade, who later defects, nothing much comes out of that. They created the Gizoids, which Sonic Battle fans can relish in, but so what? What relevance does that serve here? Nothing. Doesn't mean shit, and the leader of the group, Imperator X, the head honcho bent on world domination that caused all this riffraff in the first place, we meet him a grand total of 2 times, once in the middle of the story and again at the very end, right before he gets his ass kicked by Supersonic. Now, I think part of what makes an RPG great is its villain and the journey you travel to learn more about them, their motives, their origins, as well as the conflicts resulting from those points. Imperator X is a total lame ass and somehow more generic than Bowser, and because this game is centered on nothing but his conquest and the Marauders, the result is one empty plot. Only at the end do we see a glimmer of something, when Ix attempts to persuade Knuckles to join his cause. As played out as that is, it would have been interesting to see throughout the whole adventure how Knuckles dealt with the fact that he's not actually the last of his kind. And while there is something of the sort here, it's underdeveloped and, depending on your team composition, almost entirely optional. They dropped the ball big time on that. Sonic Chronicles is by the numbers at its very best, and a generic slog everywhere else. If you want a good example of lackluster world design for you up-and-coming RPG developers out there, let Sonic Chronicles be an example of what you should avoid. Though the backgrounds are nicely rendered, there's nothing much to these locales. Firstly, the touchscreen is used for everything in this game, and while that's fine for menu navigation to some extent, it's a different story for basic movement. Wherever you touch, Sonic will go, and it feels clunky. Like, was there so much to ask to use the D-pad? Just because you have a touchscreen, it's not Nintendo law to use it for everything. But I guess to be fair, it's not like you're doing much here anyway. You can collect rings for currency for stores that offer nothing of real worth unless it's a healing item. You can open treasure chests for some small goodies, solve puzzles a preschooler can finish, or once in a blue moon talk to an NPC for a rudimentary side quest. They're all the same, find this noun and I'll give you something for it, without offering any real insight to the world around us. They do that one time with this guy right here, but that's about 3/4 into the game, so it's a little late on that one. Altogether, it makes for one exhausting world for Sonic to travel in that's lifeless in almost every sense of the word, and making things just a tad worse is the real meat and potatoes of Sonic Chronicles, the battle system. A turn-based style of command where you can select what actions your team members will do and watch how everything plays out, but that's only if you're using a basic attack or an item of some variety, because if you're using a special technique called POW moves in this game, things are a little more involved. POW moves require specific inputs to be successfully executed, touching the center of the circle before it closes, tapping the inside of this circle around 8 times, or dragging a circle through some dotted lines. Elite Beat Agents is what you're probably thinking of, and yeah, it's exactly like that. In fact, go play that instead. It's goofy, frantic, responsive, and has music this game wishes it could emulate. The problem here is a couple of things. POW moves are your real damage dealers because regular attacks are just fucking pitiful most of the time. I never had this much of an accuracy problem here compared to other RPGs I've played. I must have missed around, no shit, 50% of my basic attacks. It's a fucking crapshoot and super irritating, and it only takes about your first 10 minutes to run into this issue. Every time you want to execute a special attack, you have to input these sequences, and it gets tiring in no time, even worse if you mess it up. Depending on the technique, fumbling over an input can either cause you to dish out less damage, or fail to cast it completely. It's mind-boggling. If say you're trying to do Tails' Medibot, and you screw up just one input, Tails acts as if he didn't do it at all. You still waste the turn, and the power points needed to perform the move in the first place, so what the fuck? If I can bungle an input for some techniques and still deal some sort of damage, why can't the same be said for something like Cream's healing abilities or Tails' supportive skills? It's inconsistent and infuriating in the heat of the moment. But I really shouldn't say heat of the moment because that would imply things getting tense, and these battles, whether they're garden variety encounters or boss fights, are anything but. Battles can take forever in Sonic Chronicles. When you're not repeatedly inputting commands for your special attacks, you're inputting commands to defend yourself from enemy attack, which gets more exhausting when there's over 4 enemies on the screen at once. Then sometimes, out of the blue, enemies can enter an evasive state in the middle of your turn, meaning nothing besides POW attacks will hurt them, meaning if you chose regular attacks you're not hitting them, meaning more turns just to defeat them, meaning more commands to input. Foes can have an obnoxious amount of health, they can fortify themselves with ridiculously high defense, regenerate health at the end of every turn, or revive themselves if you don't take everyone out at once. These are not difficult things to counter, they just take so fucking long. By the second half of the game, assuming I can't deal with mooks with some damage buffs here and the same 1-2 punch that works about 95% of the time, I'm running away from everything because I honestly cannot bother. It's not like I get much from these fights besides experience points and the occasional healing item. You would think you'd win money, but you only get that from the world map in very limited amounts. And the shit you can buy with it amounts to chicken feed, equipment that's entirely negligible, or more healing items that you already get from fighting. You can collect Chow eggs from the overworld, which shortly hatch into Chow that can supply different benefits to the person it's equipped to. God damn, what sort of heavy metal is he listening to if he's swinging his head that violently? Most of the Chow are insignificant, and what you get is completely random. Though it's possible to save scum until you get the Chow you want, like the one that lets you skip inputs for POW moves. Equip that on someone like Cream the Rabbit, and congratulations, you just snap the game in half. Though again, it's not as if this game is dreadfully hard to start. No, Sonic Chronicles is just dreadfully tiring. I was in no way engaged in any sense at any point during this adventure, and by Angel Island I wanted it to end already. From the overly simple story, the unnecessarily tedious battle system, the lack of things to do outside story progression, further emphasized when you realize about half of your time is spent in battles. And then there's the obviously unfinished presentation. I mean, besides the backgrounds, everything else in this game looks bleak. Character models are rough around the edges, the game is riddled with slowdown during battles, and the sound design is amazingly awful. And I'm not just talking the music. And I'm sure you heard enough people mention how terrible these compositions are, but sound effects from battles or the overworld are just as bad if you ask me. A few years ago, I might have told you the game was okay for beginners of the genre to jump into, but Jesus Christ, what a dumb fucking thing to say. I think my mindset was, in 2008, anything looked better compared to Sonic 06 or Sonic Genesis, so I think I went easy on it because I was a blind fanboy who just wanted Sonic to succeed. But you can't better yourself by ignoring the bad, you better yourself by learning from the bad. So start with something like Final Fantasy IV if you're looking to get into the RPG genre. Now, that's a game I think anybody can pick up and enjoy. Sonic Chronicles, besides some good characterization, which I think only matters if you're a diehard fan of the Sonic franchise to begin with, the game offers nothing to the player looking for a new RPG experience, and despite the rushed cliffhanger of an ending, a sequel is very unlikely given the lack of interest from EA after purchasing BioWare, and the amount of legal bullshit Sega went through when Ken Penders, former writer of the Sonic the Hedgehog comic book, sued the company over copyright infringement, noting striking similarities between the Dark Brotherhood and his Dark Legion. I don't really give a shit at the end of the day. And notice how I didn't raise my voice much throughout this video. That's just how dull this game is, and boring RPGs are such a drag to get through. Now, I'd love to see another crack at an RPG game, just don't do this again, whoever's in charge of that one. So it looks like I won't be finishing Sonic Unleashed until after my trip to PAX East. Say if you're heading there, I'm attending all 3 days between March 10th and the 12th, so come on by, say hello, we'll wait in long-ass lines together. Yeah, but next video is the end of the current Sonic Marathon. You guys all know what's coming up next, so I'll see you next time with my revisit to Sonic Unleashed. With all that said, thank you guys for watching, have yourselves a fantastic night, and take care.